right, hey everybody. My name is Ashley. I am powerless over drugs and alcohol and basically everything else, and tonight I am grateful to choose recovery. So have any of you guys ever heard this saying, and maybe this annoys you like it annoys me? Has anybody ever said to you, you have to know the difference between what you want and what you need? You know, when you tell somebody something that you really, really want, you're like, I need this. And they're like, but do you need it or do you want it, right? Does that annoy anybody else? Yeah, I don't like that. So most of us might be thinking, I know for me, I commonly only would think of that being told to me as I was a kid. You know, when you like come home from school and everybody's wearing the newest and the coolest shoes and you tell your dad or your mom, like, I need these shoes, and everybody has them. They're like, yeah, do you need them or do you want them, right? But is that really only for kids? I think as adults, we have to make these choices as well, right? So I think our parents might have drilled this choice making into our brains as children. But if it didn't come from our parents, then life really showed us this, right? The difference between what we want and what we need. So my husband and I had to make this choice recently. A couple weeks ago, we rented a boat for a half a day, and we took the kids out for some fun. By the time we got back to the dock, we were already trying to figure out how to rearrange our already very slim budget because we needed a boat, right? We had so much fun out on the water. We were both feeling nostalgic from the days out on the water with our families as kids. The kids were having fun. They were swimming, they were playing, and they weren't fighting, which was great. So clearly our family needed a boat, clearly. Have you guys ever heard that country song? Maybe not everybody in the room, but there's a country song, and it's called Buy Me a Boat, right? And it's like, I know what they say, that money can't buy everything, but it can buy me a boat, right? See, Chris Jansen understood this when he wrote this song. We can make this work in our budget, right? Let's just cut back on groceries a little bit. Well, that seemed highly unlikely with the prices of groceries going up. Maybe we'll get rid of electricity. We camp a lot. We can do without electricity, right? Nah, that won't work either. I like TV too much. So maybe we'll sell one of our cars. That's not going to work. So when it turns out we were faced with the option of boat or like food, water, and electricity, we actually didn't really need a boat, right? This was not the ending that either one of us wanted, but it was reality. And that is what our last message series has been about. We've been talking about the 5 essentials. And in case you came in late, or just because you guys were so rowdy and seemed to enjoy it so much earlier, let's go ahead and read those 5 essentials again. Jesus. 12 steps. Wait, hold on. Reverse. Okay. See what they did there? I wasn't paying attention. All right, ready? Sponsor. Hold on, I don't know what's coming next. 12 steps. Meetings. And service. I briefly remember that somebody told me that was going to happen earlier, and gone. Okay, great. So, anyways, here is the definition of essential. Essential means absolutely necessary or extremely important. And this is why we call these principles of recovery the 5 essentials. It isn't like that new pair of shoes that your dad said no to. It isn't like the boat that my husband and I wanted. This is a need, not a want. We need the 5 essentials. They are absolutely necessary and extremely important to our recovery. So we've been in this message series talking about the 5 essentials, and so far we've gone over Jesus, trust him with Arlene, and sponsor, get one with Kip. All the essentials are essential for our recovery. So you can think of recovery as like a 5-leg stool. You can call it a bar stool if that makes you more comfortable. So here's the thing. With this 5-leg bar stool, with all 5 legs, it's sturdy and it's strong. You can count on it when you sit on it to hold you up. But what happens if you cut one off? Suddenly it's not so sturdy anymore, right? Anybody's balance as good as when they were 10? Because mine isn't. The 5 essentials are that way. Without them all, they don't work. So tonight we're going to talk about the 12 steps, and we say around here, work them. The part the 12 steps play in our recovery is the pathway to our freedom. The 12 steps are the program of recovery. So here's the deal. You can attend all the meetings you can possibly fit into one day. You can call your sponsor and bother them 8 times a day if you want. You can pray every single night until you fall asleep. But if you're like me, you don't really start to get better and have the vital spiritual experience until you work the 12 steps. Anybody else agree with that? The 12 steps are essential. Now remember that essential means extremely important, not just a little bit important, extremely important. For me, my first couple go-arounds with the recovery, I tried my hardest to prove that the 12 steps were not the answer to my problems. I didn't want to work the steps. Those sounded awful to me. No way was I going to sit with another person and tell them all the things I had just spent all these years numbing with drugs and alcohol. No way was I going to go talk to these people voluntarily that I had lied and stolen from and apologize, especially not before they apologized to me first, because they were the ones really in the wrong anyhow. And pray? Why in the world was I going to do that? God saw all the bad things that were happening in my life, and he never did anything to stop them, so why would I pray to him? Clearly, he doesn't care about me. Nope, no thank you, not doing the steps. Well, can you guess where that got me? Definitely not, nowhere. Yeah, backwards, right? Definitely not sober, definitely not happy, joyous, and free. But I don't know, there might still be some people in here tonight who might be where I was and not wanting to work the steps. Maybe you think that you have Jesus and you don't need the steps. Jesus is great. I still needed the steps. Or maybe you're here because of the free food, which is cool. That's fine. Keep coming back. We have free food. It's wonderful. Or maybe you like the music, and the music is good too, but for me, I needed the 12 steps. Whatever the case, I'm glad that you're here tonight, and I'm not here to tell anybody they should or they shouldn't work the steps. That is totally up to you. But I can say I most definitely needed to work the steps and need to continue to work them in my life. What I will do tonight, though, I won't tell you to work the steps, but what I will do is answer the question, why are the 12 steps an essential? So I have a personal story for you here tonight. So back in the days of COVID, my best friend and I, we started to miss each other quite a bit, and we tried to get inventive and think of ways that we could see each other and hang out while following the guidelines, because in recovery we follow the rules for the most part now, besides speed limits. Working on that one. But anyway, so we wanted to follow the rules, we wanted to see each other, and so we decided that maybe we would start taking walks. I have been sober since 2017, so at this time I was about 3.5 years sober. I had worked the steps already. I had worked the steps multiple times at this point. Every single day I was working them in my life. But on one of these walks, I saw this couple that I had harmed, and I panicked, and I hid behind my best friend. 3.5 years sober, I've worked the steps already, and I seen a couple who I had forgotten on my first, 8th, and 9th step. Not intentionally, I just forgot all about them. There was a lot of people that I harmed out in my addiction, and I forgot. But I remembered very vividly what I had done and how I had harmed them as soon as I saw them, and so I hid. So I panicked, and I just kept hiding. I was so nervous, and I was afraid that they would see me and confront me about all the things that I had done. And I sat behind her as they passed, full of fear and hiding. And I do not recommend this. I absolutely do not recommend this. You know, we should not be hiding from the people, but that was what I did. You know, I'm just here to be honest with you guys. I was too ashamed of what I'd done in that moment to face the transgressions of my past head on. But you know, I'm not the first one to hide from someone when I did something wrong. Maybe some of you hid from your parents when you were young, when you did something wrong. I know some of us have hidden from the cops. Some of us hid from the cops in weird places, right, Rochelle? No, normal people hide in suitcases all the time. All the time. Hey, but we're not the first ones to do this. We did not create hiding from people that we have harmed. Let's take this way, way back to the very beginning, right? In the beginning of the Bible, there was a man and a woman named Adam and Eve. Now they had it made. They lived in a beautiful, bountiful garden full of all sorts of trees with all sorts of fruits they could eat. They walked side by side with God. They had one tree, though, that they couldn't eat from, and they did it anyways. Later, God came looking for them, and that's where we pick up the story in Genesis 3. At that moment, their eyes were open, and they suddenly felt shame at their nakedness. So they sewed fig leaves together to cover themselves. When the cool evening breezes were blowing, the man and his wife heard the Lord their God walking about in the garden. So they hid from the Lord their God among the trees. Genesis 3, 7, and 8. I didn't invent hiding from those who I had wronged. Nope, this went all the way back to the very first man and woman recorded in the Bible. Shame, guilt, all those nasty, ugly feelings make us hide and make us cower. That isn't how God intended for us to live. We were made in the very image of God as cogpals. Just a couple chapters in Genesis before this one, the very first chapter in the Bible, it talks about this. Then God said, let us make human beings in our image. Genesis 1:26. Chapter 1 of the Bible talks about this. It isn't until chapter 3 that shame and hiding are talked about. Are you hearing me tonight? Before sin, before shame, we were made in the image of God. That came first. That's Genesis 1. And do you know what? That is why the 12 steps are essential. The 12 steps are essential because sin, shame, guilt, mistakes, hurts, habits, addictions, compulsive behaviors, and all the junk of life that separate us from God and who He created us to be, the 12 steps are the restoration process to our factory settings. Our factory setting is an image bearer of God. You are made in God's image. Every single one of us, no matter what we have done, what has been done to us, no matter how dark our deepest secret is, no matter how low our addiction brought us, before any of that, you were made in the image of God. You are a cogpal. We are all children of God and people of worth. That's good news, isn't it? Yeah, so how do we get from where we are now back to where God intended us to be, right? Well, that's the steps. I recently started attending a step study called A Hunger for Healing, and the very first paragraph of the very first chapter really stuck with me. The author, J. Keith Miller, says it like this. When I was a boy, I was told the bumblebee shouldn't be able to fly, that aerodynamically, the bee's body wouldn't stay airborne with its short wings. The 12-step program is a little like that. Through it, several millions of people whom medical science and psychology had given up on as hopeless have been healed and have stepped into a new dimension of spiritual living. This is a program of spiritual flying, overcoming life's impossible obstacles and allowing God to touch us, heal us, and draw us to Himself and to a new life. Now, here's the point where you might be thinking, but how exactly does that happen? The 12-step program is just like the bumblebee who shouldn't fly. It shouldn't work. It doesn't make any sense at all, but with God's say-so, it does work. Those of us who've been in recovery for a while can agree that we are not sure we know the answer to this one. I have said it before, and I've heard others say it well, that I'm not sure where it happens, what step or what part of the journey it is, but somewhere between steps 1 and step 12, something happens. A spiritual experience happens. A change in our perception, a shift in the way we see the world, the way we deal with people, and the problems seem to be different. And we don't really know exactly what this happened, like what time this happens, what step it is. So no, I'm sorry, I cannot tell you which step is the most important. They're all important. But I can tell you a few things that happen as the result of these steps. So I thought we'd take some time to answer the question tonight, why are the 12 steps essential? And so this is all going to be in your handout. In just a moment, there's going to be some fill in the blanks if you want to take that out and get that ready. The 12 steps are essential because they restore us to our factory setting. So let me explain a bit what that means, because we are all made in the image of God. Here's a list of our factory settings. We are a cogpal, child of God and person of worth. We are loved by God, made in the image of God. We are the masterpiece of God, and we are freed and forgiven. That's some good news, isn't it? So before anything else in our lives happened, before any hurt, before any shame, before any of this, this is who we are. The 12 steps redeem, restore, and renew our place in the world so we can go out and live as all the things that we just named. This is who we are. So how do the 12 steps restore us to our factory setting? Number 1, we get right with God. Those of us who've been around this place for a while or other recovery places seem to believe that this getting right with God portion happens in steps 1 through 3. We come into these rooms broken, battered, having tried all we could in our own might to control our addictions, other people, our sexual habits, and our food consumption, and it wasn't enough. We are powerless, that is for sure. I know I was, at least. I had tried all I could, and drugs and alcohol had won. They beat me. They had defeated me. But see, that was the problem. I didn't have the answer. And that is what we learn in steps 3, that no matter how hard we try, we don't have the answer or the strength in us alone to do it, or we would have done it a long time ago. In steps 1 through 3, we learn that I can't do this, that maybe God can, and I think I'm going to try and let him. We get in right standing with God by handing our problems over to him. So number 2, we get right with ourselves. The belief is that in steps 4 through 7, we get right standing with ourselves. We learn all about ourselves, our shortcomings, what makes us tick, the hurts of our past, and why we seem doomed to repeat the same cycles over and over again in our life. In this part, knowledge of who we are and why we do what we do can help us to not do the things that harm us anymore. There's still more work that needs to be done, but this is a great start. The big book of Alcoholics Anonymous talks about step 4 as being an inventory, just like a business would take. And of course, being the good alcoholic I am, whenever I read this part of the big book, I always think back to my bartending days and inventorying the liquor, right? Anybody else? I know it's not just me. Somebody thinks about it. And if we didn't do this with our business, we would go, if we didn't do these inventories with our businesses, we would go bankrupt. If we didn't know the truth in what we had and what we didn't have, and we just ordered and served whatever we felt like to our customers, no matter if it was spoiled or not, we wouldn't be in business very long, right? And it's the same thing with our lives and our own personal inventory. In order to run a successful life or business, we must know the good and the bad, because only then do we do what needs to be done. We get right with ourselves by finding out about ourselves. Number 3, we get right with others. So I don't know about you guys, but when I got sober, I owed a lot of money to everybody. Right? Oh my gosh, everybody. And I caused a lot of harms. I learned in the steps before this that I was the center of my own problems. Can you imagine that? I get right with others by making things right with others. It's really that simple. Here I go out and amend all the broken relationships and do my best to fix all the wrongs and harms I have caused to others. All sorts of amazing things happen in this program, this part of the program. AA even has a set of promises that they say, come along with step 9. Trust me, you don't want to miss out on those. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, Google it, 9th step promises, AA, and you'll find it. You want these. I promise you want these promises in your life. So this is believed to happen in steps 4 through 9. So this part goes back to my story earlier when I hid behind my friend. When I was avoiding getting right with others, I was like Adam and Eve, hiding from God, which, in case you're wondering, is like the most unfair game of hide and seek ever. God is going to win. He knows where you're at, period. Can't hide from God. It's a bad idea. And we weren't meant to have to hide from anyone. We are meant to walk this world as free people, to be able to look people in the eyes, to hold our heads high, and walk around free. When we are always waiting for the person who we harmed to come out around the corner, we live in fear, waiting somebody's going to find us and find out what we've done wrong. Once we get right with others through the steps, our place in the world around us is restored. And then, steps 10, 11, and 12, that is just about continuing to grow in our spiritual experience. That is about keeping new everything that we've done in steps 1 through 9. That is how steps 1 through 9 are how we get free, and steps 10, 11, and 12 are how we stay free. So there we go. The 12 steps are essential to our recovery. Through them, we get right with ourselves, with God, and with the world around us. They are the pathway to living in this world as a free person. So I have a story I want to read, and if you've been here before, you may have heard this story from me, and I don't care. I love this story, so listen again. Maybe you'll get something new out of it. But the first time I read it, I thought to myself, yes, that is what it's like to work the steps. So there's a story that is told of a group of ladies who met together every single week to study the Bible. When they got to the book of Malachi in the Old Testament, they came upon the 3rd verse of the 3rd chapter, which says that the Lord will sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. Curious about this verse, what this verse was saying about the character of God, one woman volunteered to find out more about the process of refining silver before their next meeting. Later in that week, that woman arranged with a local silversmith to go out and watch him at work. She didn't explain the reason for her interest, but merely said that she was interested in the process. So as she watched the silversmith working on the particular piece, he explained that the only way to purify and refine the silver is to hold it in the middle of the fire where the flames are the hottest so that all the impurities are burned away. The woman thought back to Malachi 3:3 and remembered that it specifically mentioned that God sits as a refiner and a purifier of silver. She asked the silversmith if it was important for him to stay there the entire time the silver was being refined, or if he could walk away and come back later. The silversmith told her that he not only had to stay there, he had to keep his eyes on the silver every single second. Because if it was left in the flames for even a moment too long, it could be damaged. Intrigued, the woman asked how he knew the exact moment that the silver was fully refined. And the silversmith smiled knowingly and said, "That's easy. I know it's refined when I see my image reflected in it." God uses the 12 steps to restore us to our factory settings. And as the band makes their way back up, let me remind you tonight what those factory settings are again. You are a child of God and a person of worth. You are not the mistakes of your pain and of your past. You are the beloved of God. You are not a mistake. You are made in the image of God himself. And if you've been avoiding these steps for however long, my only hope for you is that you would stop doing that. There is so much value and so much freedom available to you if only you would work these steps. There is so very much waiting for you on the other side of whatever is keeping you from this. So we're going to have another song, and as we do, I encourage each of you to pray for God to show you what your next part in your recovery journey is. If you've already worked the steps, is it time for you to work your steps again? Are you sponsoring other people through the steps? That is a part of the steps. Is it time to maybe lead a step study? And if you haven't worked the steps, the only question I have for you is how long do you want to struggle with whatever it is that you're struggling with? Let's stand for prayer. God, we thank you that as the refiner of silver, you sit and you watch us during this process. That God, even though the 12 steps are hard and we don't want to do them, we know that you are watching us and that you would not let us sit in that fire for 1 second longer than what was absolutely necessary. God, we pray that you take whatever bit of willingness we have tonight and just take it and use it, multiply it so that we could go on to do great things once we get through these steps. In Jesus' name, amen.